Hello, and thank you for checking out the Six Sigma Tool Guide. Today we're going to take about 15 minutes to talk about histogram shapes and how to interpret them. If you feel lost at any point, you might want to check out one of these other videos. We have Basic Statistics 1, Basic Statistics 2, and Intro to Histogram. So if you're lost at any point, you might check out those three videos on this same channel to get you caught up to date. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so here just a quick picture of a typical histogram, bell-shaped normal data, just as a quick refresher. We have a mean right in the center. 68% of our population is within one standard deviation of that mean. 95% of our population is within two standard deviations of the mean. And virtually the rest, 99.7% of the population, is within three standard deviations. If this isn't crystal clear to you, then check out some of those earlier videos that I mentioned, because it will only get more complicated from here. Alright, so project goals. Well, depending on your goal and your upper and lower specification limits and the current performance, your reaction to the data is going to be different, but the method for interpreting it will be the same. So if you have normal bell-shaped data, this implies that the process is stable and consistent at the very least. If that's the case, the next thing you want to look at are those upper and lower specification levels. Normal data implies consistency, but that could simply mean that you're consistently missing the targets. So we're going to talk a bit about shifting the mean, and that refers to maintaining that bell-shaped structure of your performance, but moving the mean to the right or the left in order to fall within upper and lower specification levels. So we'll take a closer look at that in a moment. Alright, so we're going to look at some common histogram shapes. You'll remember from Basic Statistics 2, when we first started talking about histograms, we talked a little bit about what does your skyline look like. And we talked about how you can imagine your data as a city, and the mean is at the center of town, and there are various sort of surrounding neighborhoods that are either within 1, 2, or 3 standard deviations of that center of town. So we talked about what does your skyline look like on your project. We're going to look at normal distribution. We're going to look at some bimodal examples, heart-shaped distribution, something that's called the dog food distribution, a plateau distribution, a comb distribution, and an edge peak distribution. So all of these little skylines tell a different story, and they're going to give you different insights about the process that you are looking to improve. Alright, so a little brief reminder on some of these initials, LSL and USL. Your upper specification limit, that's defined by the customer. Your lower specification limit is also defined by the customer. And so in terms of cycle time, we tend to think in terms like hold time, where a customer is saying, I don't mind to wait 30 seconds for good service, but 2 minutes, that's too long. So your lower specification limit is 30 seconds. And the upper specification limit would be 119 seconds. You want to stay within that Goldilocks zone the customer talked about. In terms of delivery time, I don't mind waiting 2 days, but not 8. 8 days is too long. So our lower specification limit is 2 days. Upper specification limit is 7 days. So we want to stay in that Goldilocks zone. So any process turnaround time, anything you do where turnaround time is important, and that's almost everything. You want to understand what the customer is saying. I don't mind waiting X, but X is too long, but Y is too long. Alright, so we're going to talk about shifting the mean to the right. The data that we have right here is already distributed pretty normally. It's very bell-shaped. It looks like a very consistent process. However, once you view the data with your lower and upper specification limits in mind, we realize there might be some opportunities. The Goldilocks zone between the LSL and the USL, that's determined by the customer, so we can't change that. So let's assume that we're studying delivery times. Most of our data exists to the left of the LSL, meaning we're exceeding the expectations of the customer. We're delivering faster than they care about. And that's good news. However, it does beg the question, are we overproducing? Are we risking profitability and long-term viability for a benefit that the customer doesn't really care about? In this case, they were okay waiting, over, up to looks like 6.7 days, and we're doing a lot under that. Are we making sacrifices we don't need to make? Is there an opportunity to reduce costs in labor or just improve general quality by slowing down and taking our time a little bit, but still staying within the LSL and USL? Quite the opposite on the next slide here, shifting the mean to the left. This data is also very normal. It has a nice bell-shaped curve to it. And again, assuming that this is delivery time, our mean of 5.75 is way too high because these customers need that product between 2 and 5 days, and most of our output is falling, to the right of that USL. So the only way to create more units within that Goldilocks zone is to shift the mean to the left. So we need to maintain the consistency and clockwork of that current process, but we need to find incremental improvements in the process that would shift our mean from 5.75 to maybe about 3. So the examples on the right of the USL might lead you to process improvements regarding unnecessary steps, outdated methods, approval processes, bottlenecks, things like that. That's what's causing this high cycle time to the right of the USL, or those are possible causes of it. Bimodal shape. Regardless of where you're falling in terms of the specification levels, a bimodal histogram you're going to know right off the bat just by these two distinct humps. It's two humps that look like two sets of normal data, and it probably is just that. It's probably two processes instead of one. If you consider this to be one process, but you end up with a bimodal histogram like that, the challenge is going to be identifying the hidden second process, because there's two different things going on here, whether we realize it or not. Either the supplier input end of the spectrum has some apples and oranges elements to it, or maybe the teams doing the work have some apples and oranges elements to it. Some things to consider, are there two different sources? Are there two different managers? What's happening that's different? Why do we get these two different peaks? Are there two different sets of staff maybe that have different instructions? Is it the same staff, or at least it's being consistently produced in the same way by different staff, but maybe the sources are different? Are these really two different types of widgets? And the question really is, should they have different procedures? Should they have different upper and lower specification limits? Are we talking about two different animals here? Dog food distribution. This one's good because it's got a funny name. It gets its name from the idea that the good stuff has already been removed by the butcher, and all that's left is scraps that become dog food. So this is also a bimodal shape. It's an even more extreme version of a bimodal shape. The thing that makes this different is there's a complete lack of data in between the humps. With our other bimodal, they were sort of connected. This has a complete gap of data in between the far left and far right. And the mean is a phantom mean. And when I say phantom mean, I say that because it's the average, but it never occurs. And if you think of factory B from our previous video, or Jill's lemonade stand, those were both things that had instances where the average was kind of a phantom mean that never actually occurs. It's just the result of two extremes. So you should consider, if you have this type of histogram, consider all the same questions that you did on a regular bimodal shape. Is this really two different things going on? But more importantly, perhaps, is there something that happens before my process that pulls out the good ones? Should it be? Is there some type of like an IVR or some other sorting mechanism that's occurring prior to your involvement that maybe directs the typical work to another area and is leaving you with just the extremes on both sides? That's normally what you see here, and this may not be on purpose. It may not be by design. There may be perhaps you're getting all the really easy and really difficult phone calls, and there is another call center that is on the other side of the country that's getting that stuff in the middle. Alright, so here we have what's called a heart cut distribution, and this is quite literally the opposite of the dog food distribution. It looks like a tightly controlled process with very little variance. It's extremely normal. It looks like maybe 90% of it is within one standard deviation. If this shape exists within your specification limits, then this might just be an ideal process. The mean, median, and mode are all very similar. This looks like it is kicking out donuts like clockwork. Some things to consider. Am I seeing the whole picture? Is this too good to be true? Is there something that's directing the dog food to another area? All right, here we have an edge peak distribution. This looks largely like normal process. Primary focus should really be, again, related to where you're performing, related to the upper and lower specification limits. You need to just decide if you need to shift to the right, shift to the left, or leave it alone. One thing to consider, what is this? If you end up with this one weird spike, take a close look at that bin. Is that category something like 90 plus days or some other catch-all type category? You're probably better off spreading that data out as opposed to having a sort of catch-all. And does this, or the other alternatively, does that one little peak represent just a variety of one-offs where the training and procedures are just not very well defined, things that don't come up very often, that sort of thing? And do all these instances have something in common? Are they all being worked by or are they all coming from the same supplier? Are they all being worked by the same agent or team? What is different about that one little spike? Plateau distribution. Looks a bit like a plateau. It might imply that there are multiple processes going on. So similar to bimodal, but you'd call it, I guess, multimodal. Common for processes with multiple types of outputs that are significantly different. And a good example is a call center unit that handles subjects as diverse as billing, complaints, claim processing. They may have a histogram like this because there's lots of different things going on. Some things to consider. Skill set designation. Is there room for aligning some of these specific types of calls with specific types of skills and training? Is everyone trained in all the different types of requests that might come in? If performance is outside of the specification limits, are there specific lines or entry points into this process that should be isolated or treated differently? Do we need dedicated teams, things like that? A comb distribution looks a bit like a comb. Comes from these alternating spikes and dips. If you see this on your histogram, take a look at your data because this is often caused by errors when you're constructing the data. Sometimes rounding issues, things like that. It could be that there's a tall spike and then that short spike to its right really belongs on that tall spike if you have any kind of rounding issues. It could be also just be a less dense version of a plateau. You might have a lot of different processes going on, so I would consider any of the things also from the plateau distribution, skill set designation. Do the spikes have something in common? Is there an opportunity for training by the team? Do all the workers have the same instructions and goals? Things like that. So one last look at a kind of normal looking data. Nice histogram. We have some specification limits here. Just a reminder, anytime you're looking at examples to the left of the LSL, there may be profitability at risk. You're looking at examples to the right of the USL, the upper specification limit, then you're probably looking at customer loyalty being at risk. Are we overstaffed on the left? Are we understaffed to the right? Typically to the right of the USL, you want to look for things like approval processes, research issues, next day processing, transportation, rework, movement waste, complexity, those types of things. To the left, left of LSL, inventory waste. Is there overproduction waste, waiting waste? So, questions? Please reach out to anyone on the team if you have questions about this. Hopefully you walk away with this with a basic understanding of variance and standard deviation, the importance of viewing the whole picture, not just the average, having a basic understanding of histograms, and a basic interpretation of those histogram shapes. Well, I hope you found this helpful. Please check us out again next time. Thanks.